Hello and welcome to Global Eye. I'm Parikshit Luthra. This week started with a major rejig in the UK cabinet with Prime Minister Rishi Sunak sacking Suella Braverman as the Home Secretary and David Cameron returning to UK politics as the new Foreign Secretary. And soon after he joined office, Cameron made his first overseas trip as the Foreign Secretary to the war-struck Ukraine. He pledged continued military support to Ukraine till wherever needed and a refocus on the country as Russia continues to attack its neighbour. Talking about Suella Braverman's removal from the cabinet, the decision was taken after her insubordination to the Prime Minister, but she has also had disagreements with the Prime Minister over his handling of the illegal immigration issue. Braverman, as we know, has been publicly critical of the illegal migration to UK in her letter after her sacking. Braverman accused Rishi Sunak of betraying the British people on his promise to stop illegal migration to the UK. The Rwanda plan proposal was struck down by Boris Johnson government in 2022. It also didn't stand in the UK Supreme Court, with the court calling the proposal as unlawful. Prime Minister Sunak is now considering bringing an emergency law to declare Rwanda as a safe destination for illegal migrants. Sunak has also rejected Braverman's claims, saying he will do whatever it takes to make the Rwanda plan up and running. Let me now go across to our guests. We are joined by Navdeep Sarna, former Indian ambassador to the UK, and Nigel Fletcher, Professor of Politics and Contemporary History at King's College, London. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Ambassador Sarna, what were the political compulsions which led to the sacking of Braverman and bringing back David Cameron, who has also had a checkered past over the last 6 to 7 years, including his interest in China? The opposition in the UK has called on the Sunak government to make his financial transactions, to make Cameron's financial transactions and business transactions absolutely crystal clear.
Thank you, Parikshit. I think what we've seen over the last week or so is actually a continuation of the chaos we have been seeing in British politics over the last couple of years. Certainly since the last year, when you had a very short-term Prime Minister, Liz Truss, and then the change. I think there has been a sort of growing feeling that the Sunak cabinet is, and in fact the British government on several issues does not give a sense of confidence, does not give a sense of stability. And Braverman's comments, really possibly thinking from Rishi Sunak's point of view, have been upsetting a lot of the moderate conservatives or the centrist conservatives. So I think finally things broke when she made, criticized the Met Police on the handling of the marches in support of Palestine, and some of the language used in that is really open to question. It's also the fact that she helped him come to power. Which she has made clear in the letter which she has written, that there were several deals between them, which she accuses the Prime Minister of not fulfilling. Now, as why David Cameron has been brought in, I think it is a matter of surprise. It is a matter of some bemusement, because it's very rarely that a former Prime Minister, I think it probably happened once in the 70s, from what I read, has come back to join the cabinet. And now David Cameron does have a standing. He does have an international presence. He does have relationships with several countries. So that probably will help in the current very volatile global situation. But it also comes, as you rightly said, with a lot of baggage. It's a baggage of Brexit, first to begin with. I mean, he was arguing in favor of Remain. He never thought that the referendum that he had called for would actually be lost. And he comes with not a very good foreign policy plate. The mix-up on Libya, on Syria, on actually uniting Europe against Britain. So there is a huge amount of baggage. The softness on China, which we can discuss if you like, and also the personal integrity factors after demitting office in a manner in which he sort of seemed to desert the country when things got tough after Brexit.
Right.
And then the personal things which you have already mentioned.
Okay, you're absolutely right. many have expressed surprise at David Cameron's return. What does this mean, Dr. Fletcher, when it comes to UK's ties with China? At some level, do you think the Sunak government is revisiting its policy on China, and that is the reason that David Cameron is being brought back, or is it purely a domestic political issue?
Well, I think it will be very interesting to see whether on China and a whole range of other issues, this signals a change by Rishi Sunak in the direction of his government. Bringing back David Cameron, as we've just said, is a quite striking thing to have done. It was rather surreal, actually, on Monday morning when we saw David Cameron getting out of the car in Downing Street. Many of the commentators simply couldn't believe what they were seeing. It's really a very surprising thing to have done. But its meaning is not quite clear yet. David Cameron said in his first interview and in his statement on becoming Foreign Secretary that there are things that he's disagreed with Rishi Sunak on. Even in the last few weeks, really, he disagreed with the decision that was taken, for example, on cancelling a high-speed rail project. A number of things like that he's disagreed with. He disagreed significantly with Boris Johnson as well. So I think we're looking to see whether this means that Rishi Sunak has just decided to tack more to the centre in domestic politics, to adopt a more moderate approach. But you're right, there are also questions on foreign policy, because that's the area David Cameron is coming into. And as someone who has had quite a lot of involvement in his private business dealings with China, that's caused a degree of controversy. But also when he was Prime Minister as well, he was very keen to open up greater ties with China. There's a very famous a photo call that was done where he took the Chinese premier to his local pub near his home in Oxfordshire, and that became quite an iconic image, both in the UK and in China, in fact. And so there is a reminder here that the Cameron government was very different to some of the more skeptical approach that we've seen from, and indeed hostile approach that we've seen from some in the Conservative Party recently. Liz Truss, the Prime Minister last year, for the brief period that she was, took a very hard on China, and a number of other people share that view.
Very important. But let me now go across to Ambassador Sarna once again. Ambassador Sarna, if we speak about the Rwanda plan, after being struck down by the Supreme Court, Sunak has said that he'll do everything he can to get this plan up and running. He'll bring an emergency law if possible. What will be the implications of this? Why is Sunak pushing ahead on this? And do you expect the UK government to take a harder, a tougher stand on mobility visas, work mobility visas from India to UK as a result?
Right. I think there are two different things there. I mean, one is about illegal migration, on which Rishi Sunak has been very strong. It's been one of the top things on his stated agenda, that he's going to cut out the boats. And even after this Braverman letter, in the first reaction that came from Downing Street, he did say that, the boats have been cut down by 1/3. So I think he certainly can't give up that agenda. Whether the Rwanda plan still works is something which we have to see, because it's been opposed, it's been struck down by the Supreme Court. It goes against the European Convention on Human Rights. And I think now if they do bang through a special law which declares that Rwanda is safe, you don't know where and when that will be challenged again. Meanwhile, it seems from what one reads that, there are other destinations being considered, especially for countries whose asylum seekers don't have much of a chance of getting asylum. Albania is one case in point. Other European countries could possibly, in East and Central Europe, could possibly also come up as destinations. But to my mind, this whole thing of deporting people to another country and presumably on payment, and while their asylum papers are being processed, and to to hope that they will not be sent back in the process of refoulement
Right.
back to the original country. I mean, the whole thing sounds surreal,
Right.
a word that my co-panelists very appropriately
Yeah.
used.
Absolutely. Dr. Fletcher, talking to you about how India should be watching these developments in the UK, do you see any impact on FTA negotiations? They were not completed by Diwali. We don't know whether they'll be completed by the end of the year. We only know that there is an intention to bring a landing point soon. How do you think the reshuffle impacts relations with India and the FTA?
Well, I think I'll go back to what I said before, which is that I think the impact of this reshuffle really is quite difficult to judge on trade and on foreign affairs and on a whole range of other issues. Rishi Sunak, I think we've got to remember here, has inherited a government that was not in a good shape, and after a period of time in recent years. Where we've just had constant turmoil from Brexit through to COVID, the Johnson government, and then the Truss government. They weren't stable governments, and we've become used to a great degree of turmoil, and that has an impact on policy. It means that the people who are in these jobs are not staying for a particularly long period of time. And so when you're dealing with international negotiations, it's very difficult for anyone to really get a handle on the British government's position. I think what he'll be hoping for over the next sort of 6 months to a year until a general election is that he can project a sense of greater stability. He obviously wants to win that election. It's not looking very hopeful at the moment, but he'll want to, I think, try and project some stability. So I think there's going to be very limited opportunities for him to change many cabinet ministers between now and the election. This, I think, is the team going to go into the election with. So on trade negotiations, relations with India, and as we mentioned earlier, relations with other countries, notably China. It's going to be interesting to see how, particularly David Cameron, puts that in his speeches in the next few weeks or so, as we get a better sense of what he's doing, because there's not going to be much of an opportunity to change things after this until perhaps there's a change of government.
Right. So uncertainty will be there in UK politics for some time, at least. We've run out of time, but thank you very much, Ambassador Sarna and Dr. Fletcher, for joining us on the program. We are heading into a break, but on the other side, we discuss the big meeting between US and China in San Francisco on the 16th of November in an attempt to repair the strained relationship between both nations. We will be speaking to Victor Gao, and also we'll get you a special discussion on whether the world is moving towards an a la carte world order. Don't go anywhere.